This is Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to talk about 5 reliable alternatives to typical enthusiast cars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to announce a typical enthusiast car, usually a great car, fun, very popular with enthusiasts, maybe not that reliable. And I'll give you what I consider to be a more reliable alternative that you can choose, and we'll see how it goes. Let's do it. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. Okay, so I'm going to name some pretty common enthusiast cars that people buy, and then I'm going to give you what I would consider if maybe you wanted something that won't break the bank in terms of maintenance, repairs, reliability. We begin with the F80 BMW M3, which is a wonderful car, fun to drive, fun to use, fast, exciting, but kind of known, especially as they've started depreciating. The oldest ones are more than 10 years old now. They've started depreciating. You're starting to get into some reliability issues with this vehicle. So what is an alternative? Years ago, I would have said the Lexus ISF, which is a fantastic car, but honestly, the ISF is starting to get pretty old, and it's starting to become a little bit less of an alternative to a car like the F80 M3. It's not fast enough. The transmission is not quick enough. The tech is not good enough. It's just not quite on that level anymore. So my reliable alternative to an F80 M3 would instead be a Cadillac ATS-V sedan or a CT4V Blackwing, which shockingly, the cheapest CT4V Blackwings are getting into the high 40s, $50,000 price point. That is a lot of car for that money. That is 475 horsepower. That is a serious performance car. It's a lot of fun. But in case you don't want to stretch even to that level, the ATS-V is also a really fun, really capable, really tossable car. Manual transmissions are available. A coupe body style is available, just like an M4. I don't think that these cars have the street cred of an M4. I don't think they quite have the same desirability, but I will say of all the M3s and M4s, the F80 to me is the one that is probably the least impressive dynamically. In my mind, the ATS-V and especially the CT4V are pretty damn dynamically impressive cars. And I think back to back, if you actually drove them one after the other, you might be surprised that you come away thinking that the Cadillac is as good as the BMW, if not potentially even a little bit better. And it is certainly more reliable, which is of course the purpose of this video. If you go down to an ATS-V too, you might even be able to save some money. Stretching for a Blackwing, you probably spend a little bit more, but you definitely get a little bit more. It's a more modern car, certainly feels more modern than an F80 M3 with much more modern tech, and just the suspension is going to feel newer, better, etc. But those Cadillacs are really great cars, and they're often underappreciated. Everybody talks about the CT5V Blackwing, but the 4V and the ATS-V I think are underappreciated, probably except in the Midwest where they were popular cars, Detroit and all that. But I think if you really actually drove one and you really actually were worried about M3, M4 reliability, which is a reasonable fear, I think you might be surprised at how much you enjoy and would appreciate using an ATS-V. Okay, next one, also a BMW, but it's in a similar vein to a lot of performance SUVs, BMW X5 M, which is a great car, especially the F85 X5M. This is a bargain, it's fun, it's fast. It is of questionable reliability. And so if you didn't necessarily want to take on the experience of an X5M, I would highly instead recommend a Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT. This may seem obvious. It is the high-performance Jeep Grand Cherokee. Of course, it is sort of the alternative to an X5M. And I think there's going to be a lot of BMW people out there who are saying, well, the Grand Cherokee SRT dynamically is not the same. That is true. Unlike the ATS-V and the F80 M3, where I think they're dynamically on par, I think that the Grand Cherokee is definitely less dynamically impressive than an X5M. And specifically, of course, I'm speaking about the Grand Cherokee SRT that was like 2015 model year and up, 2015 to 20, around that era. The earlier ones are also amazing, the 2008, 7, 8 models, but I don't consider those to be really rivals to any X5M. It was a totally different way to approach the performance SUV issue, and those cars have really not great interiors. I think they're my favorite Grand Cherokee SRT, to be honest, but they are like less expensive cars that appeal to a different buyer. If you're comparing it to an X5M, you're thinking about this like 15 to 19 to 20 Grand Cherokee SRT. You get 475 horsepower, which is down on what the X5 has. You get a little bit less dynamically enjoyable of a car. Those two things are undoubtedly true. However, you get more space, there's a bigger interior for families and practicality, and if you're considering a performance SUV instead of a performance car, I have a feeling that's because space and practicality is something that you're thinking about. And more importantly, you absolutely get a more reliable car. The Grand Cherokees from this era used that 6.4-liter Hemi V8 that went into a ton of Chrysler performance cars. There are modifications and upgrades that you can make. Every problem that powertrain has is explained and diagnosed on the internet with no problem. Not that there are many, because those are pretty stout and robust powertrains. Frankly, I think that the Jeep is equally good looking to the BMW. I think the X5M is gorgeous, but I think that the Grand Cherokee SRT from this era did a great job of like these subtle high performance upgrades. And these were fun cars. They're fast. It's a big V8 as opposed to a smaller turbo V8 in the BMWs. I think there is a lot to be said about these Jeeps. You are definitely making sacrifices in terms of all-out performance and all-out steering and handling, which the X5M from this era may have been better than basically any of its contemporaries. However, you're getting some benefits back. And obviously that's important in this particular video where we're talking about reliability alternatives. And I think that that is a car that the Grand Cherokee SRT is a car that absolutely should be considered, is probably often discounted by BMW or European car enthusiasts because it's a Jeep. But I think when you drive it, you find that it's actually pretty fun, pretty enjoyable, pretty usable, and the practicality aspect has some real benefit. Okay, next one. This is less of an enthusiasty car, but there are a lot of car-adjacent people who are buying a Mercedes-Benz SL or a BMW 8 Series, both of which are nice cars. They're sort of relaxed, luxury, two-door cruiser type cars. They're good, they're fun. People get them and they kind of show off, but you would really rather have a Lexus LC500. This is a rare case where the reliable alternative is actually a better sports car than the less reliable alternative. The 8 Series and the Mercedes SL, even up to the AMG models and the M8, it's a big luxury car. And Lexus just did a better job of creating a spry, athletic car in this size segment, in this luxury cruiser world. Now, the one drawback of the Lexus is that it is not as comfortable cruiser as a Mercedes SL. It is definitely more high-strung. The suspension feels that way. The steering is more precise. It feels like more of a sports car, but don't be fearful of that. You're not talking about a 911. You're not talking about something frenetic or tight or difficult. It is just a little bit more of a cruiser. And the other benefits that the Lexus has are significant. Yes, a Mercedes SL is a nice car to cruise and flex in. People have been doing it in South Florida for 40 years. A BMW 8 Series is a beautiful car. It's attractive. A 6 Series, they are nice looking, they are good. However, the Lexus, in my opinion, is more attractive. The interior is gorgeous. It is really a high quality car. You get the sense when you get into an LC500 that you are sitting inside Lexus's flagship, which they really cared about. Compared to Mercedes and BMW, where those kind of seem like just slightly larger versions of other existing cars. The LC had very specific stitching, very beautiful interior patterns, very special color schemes, both interior and exterior. The LC also has a really special powertrain, which is this naturally aspirated 5-liter V8. Enthusiasts complain about hybrid Lexus models and how boring they are and slow, and they're always stuck in the left lane with some old person driving them. But all of those hybrid Lexus models have given Lexus the fuel economy cover to create and still exist with a naturally aspirated V8 in the LC500, which is no longer true of BMW and no longer true of Mercedes-Benz. That LC500 powertrain sounds good, feels good, is good. And that car is a really, really good one. And I'm sitting here thinking, you want to cruise in Miami with your SL in Palm Beach, it's been done. You do it in an LC finished in bright blue with a nice brown interior with white contrast stitching. That is just damn cool. And you have a more reliable car, a slower depreciating car. It'll definitely be a better financial decision, and a more fun car, more fun to drive, more fun to look at, more fun to use. And I'm just the biggest proponent of the Lexus LC in comparison to those cars. Now, when you start getting into Porsche 911, it's a different conversation, because because the Porsche 911 offers some things that the LC can't reach. I still think the LC is probably a more reliable car, or at least cheaper to own, but the 911 has now some capabilities, some performance, etc., that the LC just didn't have. The LC was clearly intended to be more of a cruiser car, like the Mercedes SL, the BMW 8 Series, cars like that. And so the LC could be an alternative to a 911 depending on your use case. If your goal is just to go to the golf course and kind of cruise around, etc., the supermarket, out to shows, dinner, the LC would be a totally fine substitute. If you are the type of driver who actually wants to enjoy your 911, you will not find the LC to be a real reliable alternative. Even though it is more reliable, it just isn't that much of an alternative. Still, to those luxury cruisers, I would get the Lexus all day long. It's better, in my opinion, in basically every way except for the badge. And even then, it's Lexus. It's not like you're slumming it. Okay, next one. Say you want an exotic. You're thinking, I've had 911, an M3, a Miata, an S2000. I've had all the stuff people have, a Mustang, Camaro. I want to get into an exotic, my first exotic car. And so you start thinking, okay, well, how bad could it be to get a Ferrari 348? How bad could it be to get an early Gallardo for 60 grand, 70 grand? Well, I'm here to give you an alternative that is reliable and still exotic, and that would be the Aston Martin Vantage. The Aston Vantage came out back in '06, and it was refined and improved all throughout its run. They added more power a couple years later. They added a V12 version. Manual transmissions were there. There were convertibles that came later, special editions with cool color schemes. The V8 Vantage and V12 Vantage are really cool cars, and the real secret to those cars, they're reliable. Most enthusiasts associate Aston Martin with making unreliable cars, and that has really hurt the value and significantly depreciated the Vantage. And reasonably so, because people think Aston Martin is going to be unreliable. But that particular car isn't. I owned one. I had one myself when it was 10 years old, and I drove it from Philadelphia all the way to California and back. I have a picture of my V8 Vantage next to a bison in North Dakota. That car always started, it always drove, it was never a problem, and I sold it with more than 50,000 miles. And when you look online, they come up pretty often with 50, 60 plus thousand miles. People used these cars, they were reliable, they were easy, they were ownable cars. They still have problems, but if you're thinking exotic car, you're thinking you're gonna end up with some issues, but these cars will be way easier to own than a Ferrari 348. It is not as cool as a 348, but I promise you that you will be using it more frequently. Dynamically, it's better, and they're just good, cool cars that were exotic. Beautiful cars from an exotic brand that actually are pretty cheap to buy, cheap to own, and enjoyable to use. And I think anybody who's looking at an entry-level exotic, maybe an Audi R8, which is also pretty reliable, or an Aston Martin Vantage. And anything else, you are rolling the dice on reliability, certainly more than those cars, the R8 and the Vantage. But the Vantage specifically, the R8 is, I think, the more common choice. If you want exotic, you want something special specifically. And I just also feel the Aston Martin brand is more special, more exotic than Audi, even if it is an Audi R8. They're great cars. They really are. I loved my V8 Vantage. I think I put almost 20,000 miles on it in a single year. I drove it to Canada, I drove it to Washington, D.C., all the way down to Charleston, South Carolina. I took that car everywhere, and it never skipped a beat. There were a couple of little issues, but compared to other exotic cars I've owned and been around, it was a dead reliable car. Okay, final reliable alternative to an enthusiast car. The Porsche Boxster and Cayman. The Porsche Boxster and Cayman are pretty reliable cars. However, there are some known issues on these cars, especially the 986 and early 987 cars with the IMS problem and some other issues. And more importantly, there are a lot of people who are just afraid to get into a German car because of maintenance and parts costs. Even if they're reliable, oil changes are more expensive, replacement parts are more expensive, even for simple stuff. And there's people who are afraid to make that leap. And I'm here to tell you that if that is you, and you are looking for a reliable alternative to a Boxster or Cayman, get a Honda S2000. The S2000 does not have the Porsche brand name, but other than that, it is sublime. Honestly, it drives better than almost every Boxster and Cayman that you can buy for the same money. You know, a nice S2000 is 30 grand. 30 grand doesn't buy you a lot of Boxster Cayman. It buys you an automatic car, or it buys you an older one that's been used, a 986. The S2000 is faster than a 986. It is more fun. fun, it handles better, it's tighter, it has a fantastic shifter clutch action, which is a great benefit of the Boxster and Cayman in all generations, but it's also true of the S2000, so you're not losing that. It is an amazing car, fantastic chassis, just truly excellent to drive, and you don't lose any money depreciation, and you don't have to worry about those expensive European parts costs. Now again, I don't think Boxster and Cayman are particularly unreliable or expensive to own, and I think both of those cars are not going to lose much in depreciation. However, if you're afraid to make that plunge, and I know a lot of people who are, then the S2000 provides a really credible alternative from a driving perspective, from an enjoyment, fun, usability, tossability. You will find what you are looking for in an S2000. And when the day comes when you say, all right, I did it, I had the fun, now I'm ready for the brand. Now I'm ready to take the next step and spend that money and maybe roll the dice a little more on reliability, then you step into a Boxster Cayman or a 911. But an S2000 kind of gets you most of the way up that step if you're just not ready to take the plunge into potentially expensive German car ownership. Although, with that said, my sixth sort of wild card entry on this list, a reliable alternative to an enthusiast car, a reliable alternative to a Porsche 911, a Porsche 911. I think a lot of people really overthink this car and really are afraid of a lot of issues and problems. I think if you buy a nicely maintained one with reasonable miles and you are a reasonable person to the car, you maintain it well yourself, you keep on top of stuff, I think you will find that a Porsche 911 is in any generation is actually going to be a pretty reliable car. There are outliers. People have had their IMS shafts fail in the 996 and had to replace engines. You know, there are issues that happen here and there. You also have the occasional head gasket failure on a Toyota or block cracking or whatever. Weird one-off, like low percentage things. For most people who buy a good 911 and do a good thorough job of researching it, buy from someone good, buy a low mileage car that's been well documented or a mid mileage car that's been well documented, you will find that a 911 is actually a pretty reliable car, and it can be a good alternative to the unreliable 911 that you have built up in your mind. So there you go, my thoughts on 5 reliable alternatives to regular enthusiast cars. All the cars on this list are good, even the unreliable ones. But if you go in knowing that they're not going to be reliable, you're fine, you're good, you're ready to spend. But you don't have to. You could always get my alternatives instead and have a pretty similar experience.